I'm Susan, I'm head of data at Pebble, and for the last 2 years there, I've worked on setting up our analytics system so that we can make sense of our data, and more recently, figuring out how to use our data to build interesting experiences for our users. So, for those who aren't familiar with Pebble, we make smartwatches. I have a lovely demo here. And we came onto the scene in 2012 with a record-breaking $10 million Kickstarter campaign, so had a lot of excitement about that very early kind of in the wearable space. And the first use cases were around notifications, so getting text, emails, other messages on your wrist, apps that give you one-click access to Uber, ESPN, and thousands more made by our developer community, and of course telling the time with a lot of different fun custom watch faces, which is still a very powerful use case on any kind of watch. But more recently, it's become clear that activity tracking is pretty much table stakes for any kind of wearable device. So in December of last year, we launched Pebble Health using the accelerometer to develop our own step and sleep tracking algorithms. And based on that, we've been able to build a lot of really interesting things, which you may have heard about in previous talks in a similar space. We can classify activities like running and walking, and hopefully more beyond that, just based on accelerometer motions. We can give personalized feedback based on what we know about a user's typical behaviors. We have a smart alarm that can detect when you're exiting deep sleep and give you the optimal wake-up time. We're integrating with your calendar and your schedule so that you can find time to be active throughout the day. And our new products that are going to be releasing later this year are going to have a heart rate sensor, and that really expands, the different kinds of things we can do, helping people find the right heart rate zones if they're really athletic enthusiasts, detecting resting heart rate. The science here gets really exciting and really complex. So with these new sensors and the ability to collect data in the background on our users pretty much all the time, you can enable a lot of really interesting experiences. But people are buying these products not because they want to have their data tracked. They want to change something about themselves. They want to get healthier. They want to be more active. So we started asking, what really encourages healthier behavior? And there's an interesting study out of the University of Washington. They used this app called the UbiFit Garden, and the goal of the study was to reduce participants' sedentary time. And you can see what it looks like. This was 2008, so they have these, I'm not sure what phone that is. I should have looked it up, but it's not an iPhone, you can tell. And on it, you've got a visualization of this garden that grows as you're more active throughout the day. And one of the research questions is, what's more important, the ability to collect data off the sensors from the phone so that participants don't have to write down their active times, make it more convenient for them? Or is it ambient feedback, putting that visualization front and center on the phone in sort of a screensaver so people can just glance down and see their progress? Even if they're checking their email or doing something else on their phone, they can see their garden and say, oh, I'm not as far along as I want it to be. And what they found is that ambient feedback is what really makes the difference. The passive sensing is cool. It's a selling point for these types of apps, but users that had the glanceable display where they could look down and see their progress, even if they weren't thinking about it, tended to maintain their activity levels over time. And users without that glanceable display saw them decrease. So what this says to me is that the interaction model and the way that you're communicating with the user is really what's key in encouraging sustainable behavior change. And I believe that wearables are really well positioned to take advantage of that kind of interaction model. It's right on your body 24/7. As I get my microphone covered by my jacket here, I can't look at my watch, but you can see what I'm doing. For Pebble, you have the always on display, so it's really easy to just have your steps tracked there, easy for you to look down and see what's going on. And it's a more intimate connection. You don't have to pull anything out of your pocket if you need to interact with something that is around activity or around some kind of health feature. You can do it right here on your wrist. And those minor steps towards making it more convenient to interact with the users, I think can be really powerful in building experiences around health. So our takeaway from this is there are a lot of things that we want to do that we can't necessarily do with sensors right now. We're not going to build something that has galvanic skin response to detect stress. Tracking people's mood and emotional state is really hard when you're trying to do it all through passive sensors. But what if we could make up that difference by engaging the user and simply ask the user for the data that we need? So we tried this. We decided to build this experimental app. It's called the Happiness app. And it's a mood tracker that runs for 1 week. And over that time, the app will prompt you to rate your mood and energy levels. You can also say who you're with, what you're doing, and where you are. And you can even customize responses by talking into the microphone on the watch to give voice input. And at the end of the week, you get a summary report with personalized analysis that tells you what different factors tend to drive fluctuations in your mood and sense of energy throughout the day. And you can see we have some very cute visualizations courtesy of our design team, which is the nice thing about having designers around. So we got a lot of interesting feedback from this. We saw tens of thousands of downloads pretty much overnight, which is a big deal for us. We're a fairly small company still. And, probably the crowning moment of my career is the CEO of T-Mobile tweeted about us. His point was that his customers are so happy that they would break the Happiness app, which I thought was a pretty fun thing to put on your resume, I guess, that you got that kind of feedback. But we also got interesting responses from users on a variety of different levels. We had users tell us that they kept going with the program because they found it a lot easier to interact with the watch rather than having to pull out their phone and give feedback on their mood. Just that minor, boost in convenience really made a difference for them in terms of sticking with the program. We got a lot of feedback around mental health, people that said they'd showed it to their counselors and wanted to keep the program going for a very long time so that they could track their mood fluctuations if they're dealing with different kinds of mental health conditions. We got a good feedback about the design and functionality again. And then finally, we heard people say, it wasn't just about the data for me. It was having that moment to check in throughout the day that really made me feel more mindful, more present, made me think about my mental health, made me think about different things that I'm doing and how I can, try to be happier. So our findings from this are that users had a twofold benefit. We built the app so that we could get cool data to deliver back to them, but it was actually, the process of interacting with the watch that added the most benefit. So, we had this thought going in that this is going to be really inconvenient. It's invasive. You're buzzing people, 4 or 5 times a day, asking them to tell us what their mood is. That doesn't seem like a very good product. And there's truth in that. I think if we had ran this for longer than 1 week, if this was an ongoing thing, you definitely see people drop out as they got kind of tired of the whole program. But it turned out that inconvenience was a feature, not a bug. When we're talking about behavior change, you don't want to necessarily make it convenient. You want to drive commitment from your user and get them to be motivated to actually think about their behavior. And we definitely saw that in this case. That said, I'm still excited by the possibilities of what we can do by tracking data passively. And I think we have plans to integrate activity and sleep data to sort of make the results even more powerful. But the most exciting thing, and I think the most unexpected thing, was we wound up validating a whole variety of research with the snap of a finger, pretty much overnight, and with no plans to run any research studies. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean. So, research says that 7 p.m. is the happiest hour of the day. I'm going to run through these conclusions, and I have references to the different papers, but we'll accept them that research has looked at this and this is out there. So research says 7 p.m. is the happiest hour of the day, and that's exactly what we saw in our data. You see that peak there right at 7 p.m. So cool thing that we can validate without a lot of input and without even a lot of planning, just by having a quorum of users giving us feedback in a specific vertical. Another thing we saw, research says that good relationships and sociability increase happiness. And again, we see that people are have the highest mood scores when they're with friends or when they're at social events. Research also says that alcohol has a short-term positive impact on your mood, and I can't advocate too strongly for this because Pebble's not really that kind of company, but we do see in our results that, in a that short period of time, in the moment, alcohol does, tend to boost how people are feeling, but, we can't avoid mentioning that yoga, exercise, and socializing, follow alcohol close behind there. There's also a lot of research about people's energy cycles throughout the day, what our kind of biological clock is like, and how our circadian rhythms work. And the takeaway from this is that the majority of the population will see a peak in energy in late morning, hit that afternoon slump probably between 12 and 4. And that's exactly what we see here again. We also see a slight peak in energy levels around 7 p.m. that corresponds to the mood boost. And we think that's probably related. People getting home, spending time with their families, see a boost in how they're feeling at that time. And finally, we got some validation that yoga and exercise tend to boost your energy. And this is interesting because energy and mood are actually different here. You can be very happy, but feeling like low energy, tired, whatever. But in terms of just feeling revved up and ready to face whatever challenges in front of you, exercise really works. So what are we going to do with this? I think we have the building blocks here to create a variety of health programs that do similar things to what the Happiness app did. We can use these same mechanics to encourage people to be more active, help them manage anxiety, quit smoking, coach them to run a marathon. And we already have a developer platform where third parties can come and use these tools to build whatever kinds of experiences are interesting to them. We're also collaborating with a research group at Stanford to try to figure out, how can we help researchers scale what they're doing? The fact that, we, without even trying, sort of jumped into the deep end of the research pool, confirming all these results that social scientists have talked about for decades is pretty exciting. And I think what a technology company like Pebble can do is work at a scale that a lot of smaller research groups can't. So how can we empower researchers to use our tools to really scale their experiments and their results? We've also, in the interest of sort of opening up all these different tools, published our step and sleep tracking algorithms, and we're working towards making those fully open source so that others can validate and build upon what we've created. So if you have questions about any of the data or data on wearables in general, you can reach me at the email listed here. It's my last name, Holcomb, Holcomb, data@gmail.com. And I have one last thing to tell you about. I was invited here to talk by Treasure Data, and they are the analytics infrastructure vendor that we use to host all of our data and give us tools to access it. And I can speak very highly of them. I came to Pebble, again, not enough coffee. I came to Pebble when we had 1 day's worth of data in the database. We didn't have ways to measure our KPIs. We didn't even really know how many active users we had. And you can see over the past 2 years how far we've been able to come without a whole lot of data engineering effort on our part, and that's thanks to Treasure Data. So they have, I believe, a booth here today. They have an event coming up on October 6th, and you guys should certainly go and talk to them if you get a chance. So as I mentioned, I have many references, happy to chat more about any of this. And I think because we finished the last talk a little early, I'm really, really early on time, so happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Sure.
My question is about how did you go about setting up your experiments? Was this done, using a behavioral psychologist, for example, or was it a hunch? How did you go about setting up the experimental design?
Yeah, I think it was a mix. On the one hand, we were personally very interested in how can we build a product that gets a handle on how people feel. There was a lot of interest in building something more empathetic, something less mechanical, and engaging the user on an emotional level. So that was of personal interest to us. We also, around the same time, had been starting to see the power of, what we have in our data. So, for example, with a few thousand users sleeping, you can identify sleep chronotypes and tell who's a night owl and an early bird. I think the last presenter spoke about that as well. So I think it started to become clear to us that a research angle was going to be necessary for us to execute on any of these ideas. So the happiness app in particular, we didn't have a ton of research background in that area, but there were some other apps on the market that asked people to rate their mood at certain intervals. So we sort of took inspiration from them. The difference is those were all running on a mobile phone. And so we were able to bring our expertise in how you build good experiences on a watch and sort of fold those two pieces together. So in true startup fashion, it's like very little good research thinking went into this, which is why I think it's so impressive that you actually get pretty valid results with so little effort. And I can only imagine what a true researcher with all their knowledge and expertise would be able to do with a tool like this. I'll take the front second row. Yeah.
I was curious if you're using any other methods related to the ambient feedback, like the art feedback, to visualize progress in the device. Is that something you're...
Yes. So we have, right now with the step tracking, you can get a watch face that sort of shows you, it's a little bar, it shows you your progress so far, and we have, I guess it's an algorithm. I hate to throw that word around because it sounds so fancy, but it's a very light algorithm that detects what your typical behavior would be, so you can see kind of how you're doing relative to that. And we actually do see that users benefit from that. We've gotten feedback of people losing weight because they had that conveniently available to them, which is really exciting. With the heart rate, we're building in more kind of ambient feedback like that because it's a much harder beast to wrangle. So we're planning to have watch faces that will show you your resting heart rate relative to what your heart rate is currently, which could be really convenient if you're like a weightlifter. I know they target specific heart rates and things like that. So I do think that we're making a big effort to kind of bring that kind of constant awareness of where you're at, to make an impact on how people are doing. Yes.
As you're getting a lot of data from sensors, do you find like the way that you're interpreting that is based off of like humans driving models, or are you using machine learning techniques to kind of let the data?
Yeah, so we've had an interesting constraint in that most of our processing algorithms run directly on the watch, which really limits the amount of things you can do, right? But what we found with heart rate in particular is that machine learning is really necessary. The variables are too complex, and it's very hard to do any kind of heuristic study or a study that will give you some kind of heuristic for getting someone's resting heart rate out of that. So we've actually could be a whole other talk, but we've built up a new data processing platform to allow us to do machine learning. But I guess I would say that there's an enormous amount you can do just with some simple heuristics, very lightweight algorithms that can run directly on this very small piece of technology. I see one there. Yes.
Have you looked at engagement between app interaction from comparing a watch to the app on the phone? See what the numbers are?
It's not something we've looked at directly. This was sort of a side project that became something much bigger, so we didn't have the resources to actually build a phone app that could be tested in parallel, but it's something I'd be really excited to do. In the back. Mm-hmm.
What happens in the instance when you're not wearing the Pebble device? How are you getting that information?
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting. So if people don't have the device on, obviously we can't track their steps and sleep. I I think this is another way to use user engagement to your advantage. If you make a product that people want to wear, then that problem starts to get solved for you. We do see a clear division between people that sleep with a watch and people that don't. If you don't sleep with a watch, then you're not going to get sleep data, and there's really not a lot we can do about that. We send out kind of a weekly summary report, and if it's clear you're not sleeping with the watch, we try to encourage you to do that. But I don't sleep with my watch on. It's not comfortable. It seems weird to me. I'm never going to do that. So I think in that sense, we sort of have kind of distinct user communities with regards to sleep. With activity tracking, I think it's a lot, we do have methods to sort of fill in the gaps. So we want to avoid counting zeros. So for example, we have our little algorithm that gives you your typical behaviors. If you tend not to wear the watch on certain days, like weekends are very common, we'll iron that out so that that doesn't affect your score. So different things like that. It's not super complicated, but yeah, you have to account for times when a user just doesn't have it on. The other thing I'll say is what's been fun about this is you see people get into routines. So you have a distinct set of people that like to wear the watch 8 hours a day. They're working hours people. They have some particular use case for it, and they take it off when they go home. You see people that wear it only on the weekdays, and you actually see people that wear it only on weekends or times when they tend to be out exercising and they're getting a lot of value out of the running classification or something like that. So we found different ways to sort of account for these kinds of behaviors. But I think what's really interesting is that, we're basing it off of habitual use. That wasn't well said, but you get what I'm saying. So yeah, more questions. Yes?
So I was very early Pebble used it for a number of years. I thought you guys were very innovative, taking me out in front. And my question is about how you now competing with an Apple or Samsung. You guys actually came up with something that I thought was incredibly novel. It was your locker room, which was attached with your app. So you could literally have one app in the high store and apps inside the Pebble.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had done that before. I had thought that led to tremendous functionality. Stick a copy.
Right. Yeah, it's not an easy time to be a Pebble right now. I fell in love with the company when I joined for exactly the reasons you're saying. I think there's something really special. The team is really special, and we're often kind of on the cusp of some new idea that then gets swept away by some much larger company. I think there are a couple ways to address this. First of all, we are fortunate in sort of our Kickstarter roots that we have this devoted fan base, and we can, rely on them and learn from them and try to expand kind of our super fans. And that's not something that a lot of startups of our size have. So we're fortunate in that regard. I think ultimately, the only thing we can do is keep trying to innovate and push towards what's next. One of the products we launched in our last Kickstarter campaign is not a smartwatch. It's called Pebble Core, and it's a little device you can clip on your shirt or waistband. It doesn't interact with the phone, and you can track your runs, listen to music, do a whole variety of things that I won't get into because I'm not a good pitcher. But, that's just to say that I think there is an enormous amount of opportunity in different kinds of products that we can build based on what we know. And the fact that we've been early on many of these different kinds of innovations, it does give us some advantage just in terms of knowledge. Now, does that mean that Apple and Samsung aren't going to come along and eventually eat whatever we did? No. But I do think that as long as we can continue engaging, our limited fan base and pushing towards newer and newer innovations, we can keep trucking along. But I can't lie to you and say we have figured out a way to kind of make it big, right? We just have to keep working on the problems that are interesting to us and take advantage of what we can. Other questions? Maybe something less hard than that one. That's the hardest question. Yeah.
Hopefully this sort of dovetails into that. It's sort of an organizational question. You said that the happiness app started as a side project.
Yeah.
Sort of culturally in the
Pebble organization, how do you guys decide what experiments to chase, where you guys want to invest? I mean, it's no small effort, right, to bring something like that to market and support it, even if it's positioned as an experiment. How do you guys determine what side projects you want to invest in?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that has kept me up at night many times. We tried a couple different ways. We had organized the company into a variety of squads, and the data science team that I lead had sort of been folded into this future-facing kind of R&D squad. And so that gave us a lot of free time to really think at a high level and go experiment with projects like these. Even in that time, we had to go hire a contract Pebble developer to actually build the happiness app for us, because the developers we have in-house are doing important things like building the new heart rate sensor and things like that, or validating it or whatever. That's one way to do it. Now that we actually have 3 new products to ship in a number of months, we are having a lot less time to do these kinds of experimental projects. And what I've accepted is that it's cyclical. There will be time when we can come up for air and look around to what's next. But at the same time, we're not a big company. We're a startup. We have to execute on what's in front of us. So now the team that worked on this is now, doing a lot of development around heart rate. I keep bringing that up because that's just what my team is working on right now. And spending most of their time focused there. So we've been fortunate in that data science is sort of separated from everything else. That gives us a lot of flexibility to poke around into new stuff, but also help out when we're needed. And I think the biggest thing I could advocate for there is having a culture that allows for that flexibility, that isn't going to kind of be counting people's hours on a clock, but encourages people to actually go out and experiment. One way we do that is we have 2 days every month where developers can go hack on whatever they want. But there are projects like this that take a deeper investment of resources, and you just kind of have to wait for the next cycle where that's available to come around. So it's not easy. Other questions? Everybody needs another cup of coffee. Well, I think we're actually good on time, so thank you guys so much. Please go talk to Treasure Data. They make my work possible, and again, reach out to me, holcombdata@gmail.com, if you have questions about, or any gripes about data on wearables, because I have a lot of battle stories I'm happy to share. So, thank you.